She went to the airport expecting a familiar face and an easy favor. What she didn't expect was a single reunion that would quietly unravel her marriage, awaken parts of her she thought were gone, and change the direction of her life forever. Emily Reynolds stood near the baggage claim area, her fingers absently smoothing the fabric of her jacket as travelers hurried past. She'd come to meet Ryan Mitchell, her daughter Sophie's best friend from university, who was returning home for spring break. Sophie had accepted a study abroad opportunity in Barcelona and couldn't make it back. So Emily had volunteered to welcome Ryan in her place. She hadn't seen him in nearly 3 years, and she'd expected the same lanky teenager she remembered, all awkward energy and shy smiles. But when Ryan emerged from the crowd with his duffel bag, she felt something shift inside her. He looked different now, older, certainly taller, more composed. There was a quiet confidence in the way he carried himself, a thoughtfulness in his expression that caught her completely off guard. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said warmly, approaching with an easy smile. "It's really great to see you again." His tone was friendly but carried a maturity she hadn't been prepared for. Emily felt an unexpected warmth bloom in her chest, something she couldn't quite name. She pushed it aside and hugged him politely, the airport noise fading as an unfamiliar sense of comfort settled around her. She hadn't felt anything like it in longer than she cared to admit. The drive home felt surprisingly easy. Ryan talked about university, his courses, his part-time job at the campus library, the small rituals he'd developed over the past few years. Emily found herself genuinely listening, smiling at moments that would have felt mundane weeks ago. She asked about Sophie, and Ryan spoke about her with genuine affection, sharing stories that made Emily's heart swell with pride. But whenever the conversation drifted toward her husband Thomas, the energy shifted, growing thin, awkward, heavy with things neither needed to explain. Emily's marriage had been slowly unraveling for years. Thomas worked constantly, stayed late at the office, and treated their home like a rest stop between obligations. Their conversations had dwindled to logistics. Bills, schedules, necessary updates delivered in flat tones that held no warmth. She'd stopped expecting much from him, and he seemed entirely unaware of the quiet sadness that had taken root in her life. But she never complained. She maintained their home, fulfilled her responsibilities, smiled when expected, and buried everything else deep where no one could see it. When they arrived home, Ryan helped carry his bags inside. Thomas wasn't there, as usual. A note sat on the kitchen counter in his rushed handwriting, "Working late. Don't wait up." It didn't surprise her, but the disappointment still stung more than she wanted to acknowledge. Ryan noticed the flicker of emotion that crossed her face, though he pretended he hadn't. The house felt different with Ryan there. He filled the empty spaces with youthful energy and genuine conversation. He helped her prepare dinner without being asked, set the table carefully, and laughed when she teased him about his terrible cooking skills from years ago. They ate together, and for the first time in months, Emily didn't feel utterly alone at her own dinner table. Later that evening, while cleaning up, Ryan said casually, "You seem different than I remember. More tired, maybe, or worried about something." Emily paused mid-motion, caught off guard. Few people noticed her emotional state these days. "It's nothing," she said with a gentle shrug. "Just life being busy." He didn't push, but the concern in his eyes lingered. It made something inside her soften, and that softness frightened her more than she wanted to admit. Several days passed, each one revealing more clearly the vast distance between Emily and Thomas. He skipped meals, left before dawn, returned long after dark, and rarely asked about Ryan's visit. When he did speak, it was about finances, household tasks, or errands that needed running, jazz and on. No warmth, no partnership, no genuine interest. Emily tried not to let it affect her. The emptiness had grown so familiar that she could almost predict its rhythms. Ryan noticed everything. He noticed the silence at mealtimes, the faint disappointment that flickered in Emily's eyes, the way she hid small hurts behind polite smiles. But he filled those gaps with kindness, offering to help with groceries, suggesting walks through the nearby park, sharing stories about university life that made her laugh. His presence slowly untangled the tightness that had settled around her heart. Not in any romantic way, just in the gentle human way she'd been missing desperately. One evening, during a quiet dinner, Thomas announced abruptly, "I'm traveling next week, conference in Denver." I'll be gone about 10 days. He didn't ask if she minded or how she felt about it. He simply stated it like a weather report and left the table to take a phone call in his study. Emily stared at her plate, feeling familiar heaviness settle in her chest like stones. Ryan watched her carefully, trying to read what she wasn't saying. After Thomas left the room, Ryan spoke softly. Emily, you should take a break too. Go somewhere. Give yourself space to breathe. She gave a small, tired laugh. I don't think I can just leave everything. Why not? He said, leaning forward slightly. You take care of everyone else constantly. Don't you think you deserve a few days for yourself? His words were simple, but they shook something loose inside her. She'd forgotten what it felt like for someone to consider her needs as important. She wanted to dismiss the idea immediately, but something inside her whispered that he might be right. She did need a break from the silence, the loneliness, the slow erosion of herself. The next day, after thinking longer than she intended, she surprised herself by agreeing when Ryan mentioned a small mountain town he'd visited once. It wasn't far. It wasn't dramatic. It was just peaceful. She agreed quickly, almost afraid she'd change her mind if she overthought it. As she packed her overnight bag, she didn't realize she was stepping into a journey that would awaken emotions she'd buried for years. Soft ones, confusing ones, ones that would fundamentally change how she viewed her life. And Ryan, quietly watching from the hallway, sensed this trip would change them both, even if neither understood how yet. The road toward the mountain town stretched ahead like an invitation. Emily drove while Ryan sat beside her, window down, letting cool air rush through the car. The drive felt different from anything in her recent life, light, freeing, almost like she'd stepped outside her own existence for a moment. On this drive, she wasn't a neglected wife or a lonely woman. She felt like someone rediscovering forgotten parts of herself. Ryan kept the conversation easy, talking about hiking trails they might explore, a bookstore he remembered, small stories from childhood road trips. Emily listened with growing comfort. There was no pressure, no tension, just two people temporarily escaping their regular lives. When they reached the small mountain town, late afternoon sun painted everything in warm amber light. The inn they checked into was simple but charming, with creaking wooden floors and windows overlooking pine forests. The owner greeted them cheerfully and handed them keys to separate rooms, something Emily insisted on, and Ryan agreed to without hesitation. Everything remained respectful, appropriate, and carefully boundaried. After settling in, they walked to a nearby trail before dinner. The air smelled of pine and earth, cool and clean. Ryan walked beside her. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply. When she opened them, Ryan was watching her with a gentle expression, not romantic, not bold, just deeply understanding. You look more relaxed already, he said softly. I haven't felt relaxed in longer than I can remember, she admitted without meaning to. He nodded, not asking for explanations. That respect made her trust him even more. For dinner, they chose a small restaurant with a stone fireplace and warm lighting. The view through picture windows was breathtaking, mountains silhouetted against a darkening sky. Ryan pulled out her chair in a simple, polite gesture that caught her off guard. She wasn't accustomed to small courtesies anymore. They talked through the entire meal. Ryan shared his academic pressures, his uncertainty about the future, how much he missed feeling grounded. Emily talked about her work at the nonprofit, her home, how life had gradually become a routine she couldn't escape. She didn't mention her loneliness directly, but Ryan seemed to understand the spaces between her words. At one point he looked at her thoughtfully and said, You give so much to everyone around you, but who gives anything back to you? The question landed harder than she expected. She smiled gently to hide her reaction. Life isn't always balanced. Maybe not, he replied, but you deserve better balance than what you've had. Emily didn't know how to respond. She wasn't used to being seen so clearly. After dinner, they walked back along a lamp path through the trees. The air had grown colder, and Emily wrapped her arms around herself. Ryan noticed and offered his jacket, not dramatically or romantically, but with simple thoughtfulness. She accepted hesitantly, feeling unexpected warmth bloom inside her. They walked close, talking about small things, laughing softly at shared memories of Sophie. The closeness felt natural, not forced, but there was an undercurrent of emotion neither could fully ignore when a gentle breeze blew hair across her face. Ryan reached out instinctively and brushed it aside. His fingertips barely grazed her cheek, but the moment froze them both. Emily stepped back quickly, her heart racing. "Ryan, this is complicated," she said, her voice steady, but filled with quiet tension. He didn't try to deny it. "I know," he said softly. "I didn't mean anything inappropriate. Sometimes I just forget you're carrying so much weight alone." His honesty disarmed her completely. She didn't feel judged or pressured, just genuinely understood. They continued walking, the silence between them now warm instead of heavy. When they returned to the inn, Emily paused at her door. "Thank you for today," she said quietly. "It's been so long since I felt this free," and smiled sincerely. "You deserve to feel that way every single day." His words stayed with her long after she closed the door. She sat on her bed, listening to the distant sound of wind through pines, and realized she felt lighter than she had in years. Not because of romance or escape, but because someone finally saw the parts of her she'd buried. Ryan returned to his own room, leaning against the closed door, giggling slowly. He hadn't planned on feeling anything beyond friendship. He respected her far too much to cross any line. He couldn't deny that the coming days would test both their hearts in ways neither was prepared for. And as night deepened, both of them in separate rooms wondered quietly how a simple trip could already feel so life-changing. The next morning arrived with gentle sunlight filtering through thin curtains. Emily woke feeling unusually calm, as if the mountain air had cleared something heavy she hadn't realized she was carrying. She got ready quickly, wanting to explore before the day grew busy. When she stepped outside her room, Ryan was already waiting in the hallway, hands in his pockets, smiling as if the morning itself felt promising. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded, and they headed out into the cool morning. The town was small but full of character. Colorful storefronts, locals greeting each other warmly, quiet cafes with handwritten menus. They walked without any agenda, letting curiosity guide them. Ryan pointed out interesting details, unusual architecture, funny signs, a bookstore cat sleeping in a sunny window. His energy was easy and warm, making the day feel brighter. At a small art gallery, Emily found herself drawn to a painting of a woman standing alone on a hillside. The woman wasn't sad, but she wasn't carefree either. She looked like someone waiting for something she couldn't quite name. Ryan stood beside her and studied the painting thoughtfully. "She looks a bit like you," he said softly, strong but tired of being strong alone. The comment struck deeper than Emily expected. She didn't speak, afraid her voice might betray her emotions. Instead, she moved to examine another painting. Ryan didn't follow immediately. He gave her space, something she appreciated more than he knew. They had lunch at a cafe overlooking a small lake. The food was simple: soup, sandwiches, fresh bread, but Emily savored every bite. She felt present, not distracted by responsibilities or the silence waiting at home. Ryan talked about his hopes for the future, but he also listened deeply whenever Emily shared small pieces of her inner life. It felt strange to be heard so completely. She hadn't experienced that in years. By late afternoon, the sky shifted as heavy clouds rolled in from the mountains. The temperature dropped sharply and the breeze turned cold. Ryan looked up with a half smile. "Storm's coming. We should head back before it gets rough." They walked quickly toward the inn, but the rain arrived faster than expected. Large drops fell heavily, soaking the ground and forcing them to run the last stretch. They burst through the inn's entrance, laughing breathlessly. Their clothes were damp, their hair wet, but the moment felt oddly joyful. Inside, the inn was quiet. Most guests had retreated to their rooms. Emily and Ryan found a small sitting area with a lamp glowing warmly in the corner. They sat across from each other, catching their breath as thunder rumbled outside. The storm made the world feel smaller, more intimate, yet everything remained safe and respectful. They were simply two people sharing a quiet moment as rain pounded the roof. After a few minutes, Ryan looked at her with unexpected seriousness. "Emily, can I ask you something?" She nodded. "Why do you always hold everything inside? You don't have to pretend with me." The question opened something inside her. She hadn't cried, hadn't broken down, hadn't allowed herself to feel deeply in years. She swallowed hard, looking down at her hands. "I don't pretend," she whispered. "I just keep going. It's easier." "It shouldn't have to be," he replied gently. She felt warmth rise in her chest. Painful but comforting, not romantic desire, something deeper, a reminder that she was still human, still deserving of kindness. The power flickered suddenly, then went out completely, leaving only faint light from the storm-lit windows. Emily gasped softly. Darkness had always unsettled her, old fears she thought she'd outgrown. Ryan noticed instantly. "Hey, it's okay," he said, moving closer so she could see his silhouette. "I'm right here." She didn't pull away when his hand reached for hers in the darkness. It wasn't a romantic gesture. It was steady, reassuring, grounding. His fingers were warm against her cold skin, and that simple touch calmed her breathing. The storm grew louder, lightning flashing through the windows. Emily held his hand a little tighter without realizing it. Ryan didn't speak. He simply sat beside her, a quiet presence against the chaos outside. Minutes passed, maybe longer. When the lights finally buzzed back to life, Emily blinked, gently pulling her hand away. She wasn't embarrassed, only aware of how much she'd needed that moment of comfort. Ryan gave her a soft smile. "You okay?" "Yes," she said, surprising herself with the truth. "I am," but the air between them felt different now, charged with unspoken emotion, not inappropriate or dangerous, just real and deeply human. Emily felt exposed in a way she hadn't been in years, and Ryan seemed to sense it. "Emily, I just care that you're hurting." His sincerity hit her harder than any dramatic confession could have. She nodded, unable to speak for a moment. They sat together in silence, listening as the storm began to weaken. Something had shifted. Not a boundary, not a rule, but a feeling neither could ignore anymore. By the time they returned to their separate rooms, both felt the weight of what had happened. Not romantic action, not inappropriate closeness, but emotional truth rising to the surface, and neither knew what the next day would bring. The morning after the storm felt unusually calm, as if the world had been washed clean. The sky was brilliant blue, and sunlight sparkled across the lake like scattered crystals. Emily woke feeling both lighter and heavier. Lighter because the storm had passed. Heavier because she knew she had to face the weight of her realization. The closeness with Ryan the night before had opened something inside her that she couldn't ignore anymore. She stepped outside with coffee, finding Ryan already sitting on the small dock, watching the water move in gentle ripples. She hesitated before walking toward him. The dock creaked softly under her steps, and he glanced back with a quiet smile. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied, sitting beside him. For a while, they simply watched the lake. The view was beautiful, but Emily's mind wasn't on the scenery. She was thinking about her life, her marriage, her future, and the strange, unexpected connection that had formed between her and Ryan. Not romantic, not reckless, but undeniably emotional. Ryan broke the silence first. "You've been thinking a lot since last night." She didn't deny it. "I have." He waited patiently, giving her space to find words. "Ryan," she said finally, her voice steady but fragile, "I haven't felt this aware in a long time. Not because of you specifically, but because this trip forced me to face how deeply unhappy I've been." He nodded, listening intently. "I'm not blaming Thomas," she continued. "People drift apart. Marriages grow quiet, but I've lost myself in it, and I didn't even realize it until now." Ryan looked at her with a soft, steady expression, respectful, supportive, not pushing for anything. "You deserve to feel alive, Emily, in whatever way that means for you." She appreciated his calm honesty. "This trip wasn't about us," she said carefully. "It was about me realizing how much of myself I've been suppressing. But the way you've treated me, the way you've listened, it helped me see things clearly." He looked down at his hands briefly, then back at her. "I don't want to make your life more complicated. If you need distance after this, I'll understand completely." His maturity touched her deeply. "You haven't complicated my life," she told him softly. "You've helped me see it clearly for the first time in years." For a long moment, neither spoke. The lake whispered softly below them. Emily felt something inside her settle. Not because she'd found all the answers, but because she'd finally allowed herself to ask the right questions. They spent the rest of the morning walking through town without rushing. The sun warmed the streets. Shopkeepers waved as they passed. The simplicity of the place made everything feel more grounded. When they visited a small bakery, Emily found herself laughing genuinely, really laughing at a silly joke Ryan made about the crooked awning. It wasn't romantic. It was simply two people being human, sharing a moment that felt honest. Later in the afternoon, they They walked along the lake shore one final time. The breeze was gentle, and Emily held on to a railing as she looked at the vast stretch of water. Ryan stood beside her, giving her quiet space. He wasn't waiting for anything from her. Not a confession, not a decision, not a promise. He was simply present and respectful. "I'm scared," Emily said suddenly. "Of what?" he asked gently. "Of going back to my life and pretending everything is fine. I can't do that anymore." "Then don't," Ryan said. "You can take small steps. You don't have to fix everything immediately." His words felt like permission to move forward. That evening, they packed their bags for the return journey. Emily paused at her window, watching sunset colors paint the sky. She felt calmer than she had in years. This trip hadn't given her every answer, but it had given her something more valuable: clarity. Before heading to her room for the night, she stopped by Ryan's door. He opened it with a small, warm smile. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, "for everything. For listening, for not rushing me, for helping me remember how to breathe." "You don't have to thank me," he replied. "Just promise you'll choose what makes you happy, whatever that looks like." "I will," she said, and she meant it. They said good night, and Emily slept with a quiet heart. When they returned home the next day, the house felt different, not because anything had physically changed, but because she had transformed. Thomas noticed immediately. She moved with more confidence, more self-awareness, more calm strength. He seemed unsure how to react, but Emily didn't let the old silence swallow her again. She knew difficult conversations were coming, hard ones, honest ones. She didn't know where her marriage would ultimately lead, but she was finally ready to face it with a clear mind and honest heart. As for Ryan, he didn't disappear from her life. Their connection remained grounded, respectful, and supportive. He became a reminder of her turning point. Not a complication, but a catalyst. This wasn't a story of forbidden romance or impulsive decisions. It was a story of awakening, a woman rediscovering her voice, her strength, and her fundamental right to choose herself. Over the following months, Emily made changes, small at first, then larger. She started therapy. She joined a hiking group. She had honest conversations with Thomas about their marriage and what they both truly wanted. Eventually, they made the difficult but necessary decision to separate, not in anger or bitterness, but with mutual acknowledgement that they'd grown into different people who no longer belonged together. Sophie came home from Barcelona and supported her mother through the transition, proud of her courage. And Ryan remained a friend, a genuine one, who'd helped Emily find her way back to herself without asking for anything in return. 1 year later, Emily stood at her new apartment window, watching sunset paint the sky. She'd moved into a smaller place downtown, closer to work, filled with things she actually loved. She thought about the woman she'd been, silent, diminished, slowly disappearing. And she thought about the woman she was becoming, clear, voiced, self-aware, finally choosing her own happiness. As evening light filled her space, she whispered to herself the truth she'd needed years to find. "I'm ready to truly live now." And for the first time and longer than she could remember, that truth felt like freedom.